Hello and welcome to the Gator Football Podcast. This is Charles and welcome to Week 10 of the college football season. I'm going to talk about the Missouri game today because that's who we played this last week and we won 14-7 against the Missouri Tigers, a new team to the SEC. And, this is kind of like the Kentucky game actually because I don't really have a lot to say on defense because like the Kentucky game, basically Franklin, similar to Morgan Newton, essentially gave this game away through throwing a bunch of interceptions that were really just off-target throws. I mean, of course, the defense had to come down with the ball, but largely a lot of it was unforced errors by Franklin. And, I can talk about some of the holes in the defense and how they were able to get some yardage off of quarterback scrambles and, basically stuff like that. And I think to some degree a lot of that was just that the UF team, just the UF coaching staff, just did not expect Franklin to be ready to go this game, so that I think they completely underestimated his scrambling ability for this game, and I think he just disappointed. I think to some degree it may have been smoke and mirrors because he was clearly ready to go, and they did do some called runs with him, which they said they didn't want to do, they weren't going to do, but they did. So you can't know with when it comes to the SEC and when it comes to coaches and how honest they are about what they're talking about. So regardless, this was a game that happened, and the defense, you can say, well, there was a good amount of yards put up against them, and I would say, yeah, that's due to a few things, not limited to basically the idea that we just weren't really sure how to defend them in terms of we put in a pretty basic package, and honestly, I just don't think I think Missouri played very well, better than they usually do, and I think their offensive line just came ready to play. And they have a couple of good guys, at the talent position at wide receiver, and it just was a pretty good game for them, in a general way, and it was a pretty mediocre game after that Georgia loss, I suppose. But it's not just. I don't want to be that kind of person who buys into the whole letdown game too much, because I've never really been a big fan of buying into that kind of thing. But I will say this did kind of have the feel of a letdown game for Florida, and but in the end, it's a win, so you really can't get too upset one way or the other about it, I suppose. I will say this though, I think the defense obviously has to be. We've seen this now a few times this season where maybe it's what we do in the film room, but I guess we seem to always have a weaker first half on defense, not just but on defense as well in the first half before we make adjustments, and I have to wonder how we're not making those adjustments sooner. All the same, you allow 7 points to be scored, that's not that big a deal. Granted, some of those were interceptions in the red zone, that if Missouri just kicked a field goal, maybe that wouldn't have happened, but, even though a field goal was blocked. But all the same, not a lot to talk about. Same thing with special teams. Chrissy didn't have a great day, but, I mean, that's not all that shocking that he would have an off day. I mean, he just didn't get to punt that much last week, really. And Caleb Sturgis injured, so, his mistake, I don't know how much you can put it on him. Clearly, the guy behind Phillips was not ready to step in because he badly shanked a kick. All the same, I mean, I that's probably one of those things where it's just you weren't expecting to come in, you do come in, you didn't necessarily perform as well as you might have wanted to. It happens, not a lot to say about it. So, I reviewed the offense, and that's what I want to talk about the most this week, because this is something I reviewed. Gator, who has a YouTube channel, he puts up pretty much a very condensed form of basically all aspects of these games, and his offensive video is only about 13 minutes long. It shows every single offensive play, so I recommend watching it because it gives you a really good idea for how the offense does in a very quick amount of time, and what they're capable of and what they lack. So I think the first thing I'm going to talk about is how we're being defended, and I think the main thing is when we look at how we're being defended, we see not just them loading the box, because loading the box is a pretty simplistic term. Like, you load the box against Georgia Tech, they still get yards. Loading the box is not enough to stop a team on defense. what the main thing is loading the box in a certain way. And how have we seen teams load the box against us? And the main thing is they have the I think the best thing to do if you're playing Florida is you send your outside linebackers. You basically send them to cover the edge, and then you have basically all your defensive linemen kind of pinch in, and I think that creates a very difficult time for Mike Gillislee. And then you have the linebackers kind of fill in these holes. So instead of the offensive line creating holes, I think we have all defensive lines attempting to create these other holes that we are being guided to. And I think the problem is this strategy does have some problems, and it does have some problems because it does create sometimes holes that the defense does not expect. So if you have a running back with good enough vision, he can look and see those as soon as he takes the ball and hit that hard. Unfortunately, Mike Gillislee does not seem to be the kind of running back who kind of makes that decision on the fly. He runs hard, but he doesn't always. If he's told to hit a certain gap, he'll run at that kind of regardless of what's going on at that gap. And we've seen that problem a few times now. Where we've seen there was a shotgun handoff early in the game where there was a big hole on the left side of the line that had formed up, and it happened largely because Missouri kind of broke their rushing front. So we had this big hole, and Mike Gillislee got the hand. Instead of seeing that hole directly, he took off probably where the play was called, and instead of picking up 5-6 yard gain, he ended up only picking up like a 1-2 yard gain. And to some degree that's a problem of the running back, but also the offensive line should be opening up holes where they're told to open up holes. And unfortunately, I hear we have a dinged up offensive line. I you don't want to hope it's injuries, but to some degree you hope, well, maybe injuries are the problem that's causing this, but there's no way to be sure, to be honest, and that's kind of unfortunate. There's one thing I thought we saw in this game that actually it was kind of weird, but it seems like Brent Peace, every time someone says something kind of about the Florida offense, it almost in a forum type way or a forum setting where it's just like, yeah, I think we need to do more of this. It seems like he always tries that the next week. So it seems like whatever people are seeing, he's seeing too, and he's trying to do so. So, there was a statistic about how Florida was running the ball on first down all the time. So what do we see this game? We saw him throw the ball quite a bit on first down. Now, was it effective? And the answer is sort of. The thing is, when we see the 4-4 men in the box and we see these cushions on the outside, we need to exploit that, and frankly, we just haven't been. And the reason is that a lot of the reads are difficult to make, and they require quick passes. And no example is probably better than when we were trying to set up a Mike Gillislee screen. And the first thing was we had to have Jeff Driscoll sell a bubble screen. The sad thing was the bubble screen was wide open, and the actual screen was completely shut down. So it was a situation where it was just like, you kind of hope that these players are starting to realize that just because the way the play is called going in doesn't necessarily mean that's what we should go with. And I would like to see, I guess, audibles at the line of scrimmage, because frankly we don't seem to be taking advantage of defensive schemes. So we saw this a couple times where we saw 4 defensive linemen with 4 linebackers right behind them. Basically, that Missouri was a 4-4, a 4-4 scheme, which is just like, when you see that, you have to wonder what's going on. So you have the 4 down linemen, you have the 4 linebackers, and then you had a safety playing right in the center as well. So you had basically 9 men in the box. So you say, okay, why don't we just break off from one of those schemes and throw the ball? And we did a couple times until, well, this was a major problem in this game where we saw batted passes come back. And this is actually a problem a couple years ago where Florida was having trouble with that too. And bad passes are a couple things. I don't know if a lot of people here understand the kind of mechanics of that, but basically bad passes come from two things: where the offensive line are not chopping down arms, that's one reason, and the second is the quarterback has to, if the they have to fake out the defensive lineman. So you really have two potential people who can kind of prevent a bad pass, and that's the quarterback and that's the offensive lineman. And realistically, we saw both kind of not do that too well. The offensive lineman, though, I think the problem there is I think they're afraid of getting beat because they did get beat several times this game. I think for Jeff the problem is that he locks on a receiver a bit too much, and I don't think I've seen Jeff Driscoll have a throw a pump fake this entire season. So I guess that's just a part of it. But we saw with Missouri that that they were really just guarding the run, and as a result, when we did see the passing game, it actually did have some success. When was it not successful? Well, when there was a bad pass, that happens, and when Jeff just didn't have enough time because of the jailbreak blitz, which we've seen now, and I've been harping on this since the LSU game, where we don't seem to be able to adjust to the jailbreak blitz at all. So we saw that as a problem, and it just seems like we have a trouble adjusting to kind of going with that offensive scheme, that consistent offensive scheme. And we saw the bad passes, and we saw the offensive line not giving enough time. But then, and I think what a lot of people are going to say is because I don't know why the wide receiver core is hated so much by Florida fans, but I mean, if they don't get the ball that often, how are they supposed to have all these catches and all this yardage? So we saw a drop pass early in the game, and it was a tough catch, I admit, but it was also a drop, and so that responsibility goes on both. And realistically, Brent P said that if you don't perform on the field, you're not going to get plays thrown at you. And honestly, I think there are guys who are performing on the field who just don't get the ball. I think Quentin Dunbar is one of them, and I think we saw Frankie Hammond actually do pretty well on the jet sweep, and he is a tight end, not a speed guy. So I don't see why we aren't taking more advantage of him in the passing game. We didn't see Andre DeBosa once, which was another kind of mystery disappearance from that guy, even though, with Patton out, you thought, well, finally Andre DeBosa would get his chance to do something, but no. So it's just, I have a hard time blaming the receivers in the passing game. There's drops, I'll admit, but honestly, I see them getting separation, and someone on the board said, do you see them get separation consistently? And the reality is, no wide receiver gets separation on every play, but we do see players. I mean, it's just the fact of how one-on-one works. If you're playing into one-on-one, unless you are an NFL corner, you're going to have a hard time adjusting to every single movement on the route. And if you hit those windows, you hit those windows. So, if Missouri had corners, the kind of corners that would get around players and bat the ball away, if I thought they were that good, I would say, yeah, you're probably right. But realistically, any separation in one-on-one, it's gonna be there. It's just that simple. And it's not like we're playing Darrelle Revis. It's not like we're throwing into islands or something with lockdown corners just hanging out in a zone coverage scheme. We're playing man-to-man because everyone's stacking the box. And there are open receivers because that's how one-on-one works in college. It's just that simple. Granted, if we were playing, shockingly ourselves on defense, I would say, yeah, maybe you have an issue there. Our corners are pretty good lockdown corners. If we were playing the 2008 defense with Joe Hayden, or 2009 defense with Joe Hayden and Janoris Jenkins, then yeah, I'd say, okay, fair enough. We shouldn't go throw a one-on-one against those guys. Our receivers are not better than those guys. But our receivers are at least as good enough to play against Missouri and get free enough. And we saw this on some of the deep passes as well, where Jeff Driscoll would throw to guys who just were not the couple guys who were covered by all things, and it was like we had wide open men underneath for 8-yard gains, and it was just like, okay, now he chooses to toss it deep, and it's just like, in obvious passing situations. And that was, I guess that was the problem, for me. It was just like, okay, they moved into a 4-2 and they have two safeties playing deep. Where are we going to throw it? Right where the safeties are, like right where the safeties and the corners can kind of both make the play. Instead of saying, okay, we have a mismatch on the outside where they're matched up with a linebacker who's trying to run out to the flat to try and catch this guy on a 5-yard out. So instead of those kind of plays, and they were there, I saw quite a few of them, we just kind of eschewed them for these, or I mean, I don't know, maybe Driscoll was eschewing them, or maybe he was just told, just that's your read. You got one read to make. Just toss it in there. If our guy can't do it, no one will get it, and that's the kind of throw he makes, and we saw that on a couple throws later in the game. I'm not going to put too much blame on Jeff Driscoll just because, to some degree you don't know what's his fault and what he's being told to do by Brett Peace. It's just a matter of reality. You can't know that for sure. That's why I really don't like the blame game too much on the college level, because you just don't honestly know that well. Like one of the things, if you recall from the South Carolina game, I was telling, why is Javanian Clowney not being hit immediately at the line? Is that on the lineman or is that on the scheme? And the reality is, well, you don't always know. And for this game, it was another situation of, well, you don't always know what Jeff Driscoll is being told what to do. I will say this. When it comes to running the ball, we seem to have an issue with pulling guys in a way that is consistently good. We seem to get fooled a lot in terms of guys coming along the backside. So when we're pulling, we're supposed to have one guy to kind of block that to allow the guys to pull so the play doesn't get blown up in the backfield. We commonly see guys just bull rush right through that. And I think that's an issue we have to really work on with just across the board. I mean, if we can't have a pulling guard effectively, we're just not going to run the ball that well. It's just a matter of course. If we're going to get the running game working against these stacked boxes, we have to have our blockers move well. That's the only way it's going to work. You need to get one-on-one blocking on the outside. Even on the good Gillislee runs, it's not because we're necessarily blocking fantastically. It's because someone on their team usually made a bad read. Because those plays should only go, even if everyone's blocking one-on-one, it should only go for 5 or 6 yards. Instead, when the Gillislee run goes for 20-something yards, someone on their team basically fucked up. And realistically, do we want an offense that depends on people fucking up? And I would say no. That's not a great offensive strategy to have. And that was the Urban Meyer offense to a T. Get the ball to guys in space, because you hope that your skill players are better than their skill players. So where does that end? Well, when you face a defense that's great at open field tackling and great in space, like our team right now kind of is actually. So it's just for me, it's actually kind of a deja vu experience. We're not necessarily getting the ball to the guy in space, but it's another situation of, if without offensive line consistency and blocking, and without perimeter blocking, and really just blocking in general to be consistent, we're just never going to make those plays consistently at all times. And I think that's why we'll have trouble actually against Louisiana Lafayette and the FCS team in Jacksonville State, in terms of, I don't think they'll be as big blowouts as people might like, purely because I think our offense is a little too predictable now. And I think even against a poor team, I think without a real working, passing game, it doesn't really matter how much more talented you are. I mean, Mike Gillislee has shown that he can break through blocks, run through arm tackles at a certain degree, but he's also susceptible to being tripped up. Mike Gillislee's biggest problem, I would say, as a runner, is that not only does he sometimes go for the where the play is drawn up to instead of where the open hole is, he also has a tendency to get tripped up over his feet, where if he goes for his thighs, yeah, it's impossible to bring that dude down without a good grip. But if he goes for his ankles, Gillislee seems to commonly get tripped up going right into the hole. So, and unfortunately, Driscoll had that happen to him this last game as well. We just seem to have trouble with guys wrapping our ankles around. That's kind of a weird problem to have, I guess. But it is something that I did notice. So we have Louisiana Lafayette this week. I think it's going to be hopefully a game for us to rest a lot of our injured players. But I mean, once again, I think the main problem is, as long as we don't have consistency along the offensive line and along the blocking in general, I think we're going to struggle as an offensive unit. And I think that's really the main thing. The main thing is consistent. You have to consistently do it, because what we see now is even if you do it for 12 plays in a row, all of a sudden you take that one play off, you get a sack that drives over because we can't go deep, or we can't get those plays over 12 yards with any kind of reasonable certainty. So in the end, that's kind of how I see it. I'll talk about it again next against Louisiana Lafayette. I hope we just are able to take this game and just straight up annihilate them due to just overpowering them, hopefully. But honestly, we struggled against Bowling Green doing the same thing. So I honestly don't suspect that this will be that large of a blow. I think our offense is really just kind of just struggling to get their feet under them at this point. So hopefully it'll be an easy win, and I think it will be a win, at least at the very least in the third quarter. So we'll pull away due to talent and conditioning and depth. But all the same, that's not a great way to win against a team like Louisiana Lafayette. So, oh well. All the same, a win is a win, so I can't be too upset. I mean, but all the same, there's a lot of issues that need to be taken care of. So, as always, this is Charles. I hope you guys have a good weekend this coming weekend for Louisiana Lafayette. I hope you guys had enjoyed the Missouri weekend, and I will see you guys back here next week. Bye.